One of the partners at the firm mentioned that was one of the things that they weigh heavily into when they're looking for trainees. And I think the reason why is because there's sort of that demonstration of hard work, that demonstration of, willing to put the hours in at a job that, isn't necessarily the most glamorous.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. Whether you're at school, sixth form, university, thinking about a career in law, or exploring law careers, you're in the right place. We are the one-stop shop for student lawyers. If you'd like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com. Welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. My name's Camilla. I'm a trainee solicitor at a law firm in London, and I'm going to be your host for today. In today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Milan Pandit, a trainee solicitor at Leathes Prior Solicitors. Milan is a double training contract offer holder and provides law career tips on LinkedIn to his 8,000 plus connections. In this episode, we will be learning about Milan's journey into law, finding out his top tips for securing a training contract, gaining insight into the work that Milan does as a trainee solicitor and the tips that he's picked up along the way. So without further ado, let's hand over to Milan. Welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast, Milan. It's great to have you with us.
Hi Camilla, thanks for having me.
So let's kick off the episode by just maybe finding out why and when you decided to pursue a career in law.
Yeah, it came very much, I think, a surprise, a bit of a late decision, probably compared to a lot of people that sort of set their way into law. I made my decision around, I think it was towards the end of my third year of my undergraduate degree. So I didn't study law. I studied politics, philosophy and economics, mostly because I wanted to kind of keep as many doors open as possible, as I had no idea what I wanted to do after uni. Sort of entertained the idea towards the end of my third year. And I suppose from the very little information that I had at the time about what the job entailed, I thought it might be a good fit. Did a little bit of work experience the summer before I was going to start my conversion. Loved it. Started my conversion, loved it. And very, very fortunately, have started the job now and love it just as much.
That's great. Such an interesting journey. I really like the fact that you're a non-law graduate, because we sometimes get students questioning, whether it's difficult to make the transition if you haven't studied law at undergrad. So it's really nice to see that obviously you have not found it to your detriment at all. And that's the understanding that I get, that law firms like to hire a range of people, not just law students. So you're obviously walking proof of that. And so what was your biggest challenge challenges when going through the TC application process, and how did you overcome those challenges?
I think the main thing for me was figuring out what on earth law firms actually wanted from people, going through the application process. I suppose I'd had a few friends of mine during my undergraduate degree that did the traditional law route, law A level, straight into a law undergraduate degree, do your LPC, and then off you go. And I suppose they always kind of spoke about things like commercial awareness that went right over my head, and all these sort of concepts that law firms probably wanted out of their applicants, but I had no idea how I was going to make myself appealing in that way. In terms of overcoming that, I suppose I'm not sure necessarily how I did that. It's probably a question that I'll need to ask myself of those that decided that I'd be a good fit. But I think the way that I managed it was sort of trying to make sure that I ticked as many boxes as I thought was there to begin with, and I suppose asking the question to myself, well, if I was at the other end of the table conducting the interview, what would I want out of someone? I'd want them to be hardworking. I'd want them to be eager. I'd want them to be respectful. I'd want them to be inquisitive. How much are they doing in their own time in terms of advancing their understanding of what solicitors do, what sort of markets they operate in, and larger clients and so forth of the firm themselves. And I think ticking those boxes, a lot of them would have been universal. I think a lot of them they would have agreed with as well. And hopefully that meant that by sort of putting down a solid base in terms of what I would hire, hopefully that sort of ticked the same boxes for them.
I really like how you approach that. And I think it just goes to show that it's quite important to be self-aware as well when you're going through the process and thinking about, where are my weaknesses and where can I try and improve. So I think that's a really great approach. So what do you think that law firms are looking for in their trainees, and what tips would you give to our listeners who are going through the process of applying for training contracts at the moment? Perhaps, what you thought when you were going through the process and now you're actually in a law firm. I wonder if what you think that they're looking for has actually changed at all as well.
Yeah, I think I do definitely think the more partners of law firms that I'm able to speak to and get to know and see how they operate, I do think that each and every one of them are looking for very different things. But there are sort of some underlying principles that they're looking for. And I think the main two, and certainly what I would be looking for as well if I was in that position as well, is, well, hardworking. Are they hardworking? How much are they going after it? And I suppose on top of that, and also interwoven with that, is ambition. And I think, that needs to be tempered with a level of accepting that, you're at the very beginning of your legal career and it's not all going to come overnight. But, how good do they want to be, and how eager are they to take on work? How eager are they to improve? And, it's not necessarily obvious how to demonstrate that. But if you're able to do that, I don't think there's many recruiting partners or members of the management team that are going to bat an eye at that. I think that stands out, and that is the main objective, I think, of any applicant, to demonstrate that you've got that drive and you've got that ambition, and you're willing to put that into practice if they gamble on you.
Absolutely. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your non-legal work experience and how that's helped you as a trainee.
Yeah, I think a lot. Quite a lot. I didn't actually have any legal work experience when I left my undergraduate degree, when I graduated from that. And so in terms of actually putting together a solid application, I was leaning very, very heavily on my non-legal work experience. And I do think the job that I worked for around a year and a half, almost 2 years, I think, while I was doing my undergraduate degree, was working at McDonald's. At the very beginning of my application, I remember I had conversations with friends of mine, sort of discussing with them, well, should I talk about that? Is that a job that I really want to, put my weight behind? And it sort of garnered mixed opinions. Some were sort of like, well, it's not particularly impressive. But then on the other hand, I think, and definitely from discussing with my parents, who were, quite big influences behind sort of crafting my applications, they were very much of the opinion that it does demonstrate a willingness to get your hands dirty, and I got incredible training there, and I had great experiences there. You really do work with such a diverse range of people, all sorts of backgrounds, and I remember somewhat more recently I put together a LinkedIn post about it, and one of the partners at the firm mentioned that that was one of the things that they weigh heavily into when they're looking for trainees. And I think the reason why is because there's sort of that demonstration of hard work, that demonstration of willing to put the hours in, and at a job that, you know, isn't necessarily the most glamorous while you're working part-time, but I loved it and I learned a lot out of it, and I think it was a big reason behind, you know, getting what I wanted in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Again, you know, I have questions sometimes from aspiring lawyers who are worried because they don't have much legal work experience and they think they're not going to be able to demonstrate their suitability for a training contract. But again, like you just demonstrated, and you know, the understanding that I have is that non-legal work experience says so much about you and your experiences and your skills. And working at McDonald's, you must have worked under pressure and, you know, had to deal with difficult customers.
That's right.
Into detail to make sure you get the order right. But there's all these things that you can pull out of experiences like that. So, you know, for me, when I worked in bars, and that was, you know, really difficult. Sometimes, you know, more difficult than working in an office because of the antisocial hours and the difficult customers. So, yeah, I completely agree that non-legal work experience is really, really, really good.
For the past 4 years, I have been very lucky in the sense that I have had the shoulders of friends and family to sob on, and unfortunately for them to vent at, whilst I have been under pressure and stress from university deadlines, and whilst going through the grueling process of training contract applications and interviews. They have been my unofficial therapists, and during tough times have reminded me that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. But it's not always possible to rely on a friend or family member to help you through difficult times, especially if they are not trained therapists. And sometimes speaking to somebody outside of your family or friendship circle is a better option anyway. If you're going through stressful times, looking to improve the quality of your life, vent, or need somebody to remove the weight of the world from your shoulders, BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's podcast, may be right for you. BetterHelp is the largest therapy platform in the world, and it changes the way people approach their mental health and helps them tackle life's challenges by providing accessible and affordable care. The therapists at BetterHelp are qualified to help you through everything from daily stresses to anxiety, relationships, depression, addictions, eating, sleeping, trauma, anger, family conflicts, grief, self-esteem, and much more. After you sign up, BetterHelp will match you to a therapist who fits your objectives, preferences, and the type of issues that you are dealing with. So whilst a friend or family member, aka an unofficial therapist, is great to speak to, therapists on BetterHelp include psychologists, family therapists, licensed clinical social workers, and licensed professional counsellors. Visit www.betterhelp.com/TSL for 10% off your first month. That's www.betterhelp.com/TSL for 10% off of your first month. I know that I'm looking forward to using BetterHelp to help me get through the SQE when I start it next year.
So you went on to secure training contracts at 2 firms, which is a really impressive feat. So well done for that. And it's obviously a great position to be in, but how did you decide which firm to join? If there's anybody out there who's in the same position as you, holding 2 training contract offers and not quite sure what to do, how did you decide? And perhaps if you've got any advice for our listeners.
I've no doubt that there will be. I think, you know, I was quite fortunate to know a lot of people that were in the same position as me when I was applying, and a lot of times with offers, you know, it sort of feels like London buses. It's sort of, you know, nothing comes through, and then suddenly, you know, a lot comes through all at once, and it's sort of very rare that you get people that will get one offer in a vacuum, and well, unless, you know, that's sort of come through at an opportune time, and you're sort of not further down with the process with others. But I definitely know I wasn't the only person in that sort of situation, and I suppose the answer to how I made that decision, it wasn't an exact science. I think I definitely recognised that at the time, I don't think there was a wrong decision. I'd conducted vacation schemes at both of these firms, one of which was Leathes Prior, where I ended up. And I'd loved my time there. I'd loved speaking to everyone that I'd spoken to there. I was excited about joining both. And so there wasn't really a wrong decision, as long as whenever I made the decision, I sort of made it and didn't look back, if that makes sense. And I think the main thing that drew the line for me was sort of coming down to progression. In terms of my career, I sort of want to emulate some of the lawyers that have really kicked off at a very early stage of their career and taken on as much responsibility as they could have taken. That really appeals to me. And not to fly the flag for my firm too much, but one of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that we had half of our partnership as people that had previously trained at the firm. Half of the partners had started at that trainee level, qualified, gone up the ranks, and now we're forming the people around the table making the decisions. And that's incredibly rare, and something that is also very, very hard to hold on to. But also for me says a lot about the way that they look at their trainees. I thought by choosing the firm that I did, that I would then be looked at as someone with that sort of potential. And I think that's really followed through from my experience so far. I think that level of responsibility has been given, that level of expectations been leveled on me, and I loved that. It's exactly what I wanted. And while a lot of things were equal between the two, that's what did it for me. And I think that's heavily based on knowing who I am and what I want from my career.
That's really good advice. Thank you, Milan, for going into that. And so what are your tips for impressing during a vacation scheme?
So, I mean, like I said before, I think the main thing is demonstrating that sort of hard work and enthusiasm that, is so hard to teach. But if you have it, it very rarely diminishes throughout the rest of your career. Well, certainly from viewing people above me at my firm, that seems to be the case. But I think a lot of people who conduct themselves on vacation schemes sort of are faced with a problem where they need to balance out two competing goods. One of them is completing the work really well, and that's very important, naturally, because you are going to be judged on that. But on the other hand, you've got actually making yourself known throughout the firm and meeting people and getting yourself out there and leaving a positive impression on people, that when the vacation scheme's over, they're sort of willing to say at the pub, or if they're asked in passing, that person, I remember them, they were really nice. I'm really glad that they came, and it seems like they'd fit in well if we went that way with them. And I think that's something that I didn't really have a great opportunity to do when I did my vacation schemes. I did mine during lockdown. So it was all remote. The only people you really spoke to at any of the schemes that I did were the people that you were doing the task with. And that was still very useful, but you didn't have that opportunity to be within the firm itself. And I think people often err too far on the side of the work side rather than the getting themselves out there and speaking to people and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone socially. So I think the way that I've sort of dealt with that as a trainee, because obviously I'm still new, I'm still meeting new people and getting myself known, is just mucking in and getting involved in the tea round. Not only are you meeting everyone that way, but also you're doing everyone a favor, and it's a favor that people remember, even if it's tiny. If someone makes me a nice cup of tea, I'm going to remember that. And it's just another string to your bow, really, as to why you should be picked and not someone else who maybe didn't get themselves out there but did good work, but they haven't left that sort of positive social impression.
Really good tips again. I think even like you said, something simple as a cup of tea all those little actions really add up and can just make you, a nice person to sort of work with in the office. And that's really important to demonstrate. So yeah, thank you for explaining that. So now that you've started your training contract and you're some way into that now, what work have you been doing as a trainee solicitor, and what does a typical day look like for you, if there is such a thing, of course?
Well, that's the thing. I think maybe you'll be able to sympathise with me a little bit, in the sense that I understand you're also in litigation. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm in my second seat in commercial litigation. So yeah,
it's exactly the same as me. I'm also in my second seat in commercial litigation.
Yeah, it can be very, very, like this week was very intense because we had a few hearings coming up. It's all hands on deck to try and get things done on time. And things always seem to pop up out of the blue, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think so. While there are probably some things that stay the same, the idea of a normal day, a day in the life, is quite hard to sort of pinpoint with any accuracy. But that is definitely a draw of the area. I think definitely from speaking to members of my team that have decided it's for them. They've qualified there and they're continuing their careers there, and they're happy as can be. They love the fact that there isn't really a typical day. Everything can be thrown out of the window one day. Another day you're sort of in control and you can deal with things in a methodical fashion. And I suppose in terms of the work that I'm involved in, I think one thing I was a little bit concerned of before I was a trainee was the idea that, okay, am I going to be photocopying all day or doing admin all day, which, I've no problem with doing admin, but if that was all that I was going to be doing, I would have been a bit concerned. But luckily that couldn't really be further from the truth. And actually, admin now presents itself sometimes as a nice break from how difficult and engaging the work is that I'm involved in. Whether it's spending a day drafting a witness statement one day, whether it's dealing with a handful of new inquiries the other, whether it's helping prepare for a hearing. I think, and you'll know this better than I will, that commercial litigation is just so incredibly varied, and sort of what comes with that is that sort of no 2 days are the same. Everything is always novel and new, and with that you're really able to sort of get a whole lot of experience in a very short period of time, and naturally that's going to make you a lot better than you would be if you were stuck doing the same thing every day.
Yes, I completely agree. It's really good to get a broad range of experience, and the variation definitely keeps it interesting. And you can quickly, you can look back. I don't know about you, but when I first start a seat, it can be sometimes a little frustrating because you have to start at the beginning and again, not really knowing that much. And then, but it's such a steep learning curve. And then, by the time you come to the end of the 6 months, it seems to be the case that you feel a bit more comfortable and feel like, oh yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing now. And then the rug gets pulled out from underneath your feet and you start again from the next seat. But yeah, it's really interesting how steep the learning curve is, and I do really enjoy that about the role. So what tips do you have for other aspiring lawyers or current trainees about how to do well as a trainee solicitor?
I think it's a very tough question, because I think, naturally I am sort of trying to answer that question at the moment. I'm not really in a position where I'm doing everything right, and I wouldn't want that to be the case, because I'm training, and I suppose if you're doing everything right, then you know that you're not being pushed to your limits, and it's definitely a case where you sort of bounce between doing well and not doing well, and maybe that's, I suppose, where my advice for people coming in as trainees bears its relevance. I think and I'm sure I'm not the only person prone to this. Perhaps you've had a pretty successful background in education. Generally things have gone how you wanted it to. You've gotten results that you wanted it to, and you've gotten used to sort of maybe not succeeding at first try with things, but succeeding in the end with things. And I definitely, I didn't know it at the time, but when I started my training contract, I definitely went into it with a mindset of, I will do everything right. So I'll do everything that I can to make sure I do everything right. And if I do something wrong, then it's because I haven't worked hard enough. And while that's true some of the time, I think also as a trainee solicitor, you do have to prepare yourself for inevitable failure. You will get things. It doesn't matter if you're working 24 hours a day, every day. You will get things wrong because you simply don't have the experience. You're doing something completely new. Sometimes you're even given things that you're actually expected to fail on, but they're good. They're really good, learning exercises for you. And that can't be viewed with that sort of mindset of, oh, well, I need to be succeeding at everything. Instead, you sort of have to embrace that failure of certain elements and, still pick yourself back up and say, okay, I've learned something from this, and that mistake that I made won't happen next time I do that task. But also not giving yourself too much of a hard time and saying to yourself, well, okay, I'm a trainee solicitor for a reason. I'm not qualified for a reason. If I was left to my own devices to this, it would go badly. But I'm in a position where I'm being trained up by really seasoned and excellent solicitors who are prepared for this to go wrong when I do it. And that's sort of the nature of the job. And, making your peace with that is quite crucial to getting through your training contract with your head held high.
Fantastic tips.
Don't forget that if you're looking for a way to remove the weight of the world from your shoulders, the therapists at BetterHelp are qualified to help you through your daily stresses. Just visit www.betterhelp.com/TSL for 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp.com/TSL for 10% off of your first month.
So, Milan, as someone who has built, an impressive platform on LinkedIn, it appears that, you're perhaps, quite experienced in personal branding and building professional networks. So I wondered if you've got any top tips for our listeners on building networks and personal brands.
I think, so it's part of the reason why I think I've been able to build something on that front is because I have had an incredible amount of support from my firm. We're sort of in a position at the moment where we're quite keen to, sort of embrace the importance that social media is seeming to take, and there's sort of a concerted effort across the firm for people to stick their head above the parapet and get themselves out there. And I think the way that I've been able to do it is the fact that I started very early and in a position where no one really had their eyes on me. So all that fear and anxiety of posting at the beginning was kind of confined to what I was feeling. I really think that, as trainee solicitors, as paralegals, as people at the very beginning of their careers, perhaps, you're in the prime position to start being active on social media, because if you fail, there's not really, and you will fail, by the way, because I did, and I have, and I've had posts and the like that have just completely been swept under the rug and weren't successful, and all the negative emotion that is, that surrounds that is involved. But when you're at that stage of your career, it doesn't matter. You're sort of expected to not turn everything you touch into gold, and for you to branch yourselves out in certain areas and not take to it straight away, that's fine, because it actually reflects what's expected of your work. Your work's not supposed to be perfect right now, so why would your activity on social media be any different? So I suppose, while it might seem a little bit hollow, my main piece of advice is just do something, and do it consistently. It can be as simple as saying once a month I'm going to post a very short piece about where I'm at on my career, and it's going to not garner much attention, but I'm going to keep doing it every month. And there really does seem to be, from my experience, a bit of a snowballing effect, in the sense that for quite a long time at the beginning nothing happens, and then all of a sudden people start interacting with what you're doing. People start recognizing that you're making an effort, and and encouraging you to keep it up. And after a while, you start getting into a position where it's something that is easy. And it's I'm now very fortunate to be in a position where I don't really think too much about activity on social media and building up a personal brand and that sort, because I've been doing it for quite a while. It's sort of part of my routine, and getting to that stage is sort of the golden point. But that all begins with sort of roughing it at the beginning, and although it seems unnatural, sort of scheduling yourself to make an effort every week, every month, every however so long you want to leave it, till eventually it's sort of mundane, and it's just something that is part of your work life.
Really good advice. I mean, I came across your LinkedIn profile. I think that the posts that you write are really relatable, and I really resonate with them, and I really like the advice that you give. So you're a great person to follow. So if anybody who is listening hasn't already followed Milan on LinkedIn, then be sure to go and follow him, because he gives really good advice. Are you on, is it LinkedIn that you're on? Are you on any other platforms, or do you focus on LinkedIn?
So I'm just on LinkedIn at the moment. There's always that thought about doing more. I'm obviously quite, I admire quite a lot what you're doing here in terms of putting together a podcast. I think that's amazing. I didn't actually realize you'd been doing it for so long. Well, I've been listening to, I know you had one recently with Megan Horn. Is that correct?
Yes. Hearsay. Yeah, we've interviewed her a few times now.
That was it. Yeah. And I was just quite amazed with how effortless it sort of seems, and how natural you both are in talking in that fashion. And I think while I've got to a point where on LinkedIn it's a bit it's sort of my bread and butter now, there's definitely scope to do other things, but yeah, that's where I am for the moment.
So watch this space then, from Milan. It'd be exciting if you branch out. I think I think you'd do really well. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been great to have you with us. You've given some great nuggets of advice. We look forward to following your journey for the rest of your training contract and beyond.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to all of the listeners for tuning in. Please do go and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you like this episode. And until next time, goodbye.
To hear more of the Student Lawyers podcast, hit the subscribe button and leave us a star rating and review. If you would like to join The Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentLawyer.com.